Now, in this week's discussion starter video, I'm going to be delving into a topic suggested by Stephen Ramsey about what can Disney and or Lucasfilm do to create a satisfying end to the Skywalker Saga with Episode 9. And I very much like how he worded this, that instead of asking what'll make for the best movie or what can maybe be done to start healing the fan base, he asked, how can this whole saga be wrapped up in a satisfying way? Because assuming Episode 9 is going to be the end of the Skywalker Saga, that there won't be an Episode 10, at least not for many years yet, this movie is going to shoulder the burden of putting a new ending on that Skywalker Saga and replacing the near-perfect ending we got at the end of Return of the Jedi. And if it can be somehow done well, or even extremely well, everything else theoretically should just kind of fall into place. In other words, if this does give us a satisfying end to the Skywalker Saga, it'll also likely be regarded as a very good movie and go a long way in fixing some of the issues with the fan base. So how can this be done then? Well, we should probably first look at the recent official announcement of the cast for Episode 9, where there were two surprising names on that list, those being Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill. And the reason why I say those were surprising is because we really weren't sure how Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams, who of course is writing and directed Episode 9, would handle the unexpected and unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher, who plays Leia in the Star Wars Saga. Because apparently she was originally going to have a very large and significant role in this last movie of the trilogy, and I'd have to guess the game plan was going to be having Leia play a big role in deciding the fate of her son Ben Solo or Kylo Ren. Because though Kylo could bring himself to kill his father Han in Episode 7, he couldn't bring himself to kill his mother Leia in Episode 8. Though I do wonder if Leia thinks it was him that fired the shot that, by all rights, should have killed her. After all, she was feeling his presence and apparently connecting with him on some level just before the explosion happened. Anyway, then there's also the announcement that Mark Hamill would be in Episode 9, and though that might seem like a no-brainer, that of course he'll be back as a Force Ghost, I'm surprised they actually announced it or put his name on the casting list. Again, I think we could all assume he'd be back, but this took any and all possible surprise out of it. And not to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I do wonder if this news was aimed at the disgruntled fans, trying to get them excited by the fact that yes, Luke Skywalker will indeed be in Episode 9, and perhaps something will transpire in this movie that makes them feel better about how he was in Episode 8. And I know there are some out there that might want to ask the question now, could Luke return to life in Episode 9? I mean, did he really even die in Episode 8? And before you laugh that off and call it ridiculous, that was apparently what Colin Trevorrow, the original writer and director of Episode 9, wanted to do. He wanted to bring Luke back to life, and his reluctance to let this idea go might even be a big part of the reason why he got fired. And when you keep in mind that he was let go before Episode 8 even came out, and the backlash of course happened, perhaps Lucasfilm and Disney would be more open to the idea of Luke returning to life. Now, do I think that's even a good idea? Well, not necessarily, because dead really should mean dead, or it takes some of the emotional weight away every time a beloved character dies, or in other words, leaves you thinking of ways they could come back instead of feeling the loss. One of the problems with comic books, for example, is every time they make a big deal about killing a character off, you know it's only a matter of time before they come back. So, going under the assumption that Luke will not be coming back to life, and he'll only be a Force ghost, and that Leia will have a very small role in the movie since they're using unused footage of her from the previous movie, how do you create a satisfying end to the Skywalker Saga when you pretty much just have one Skywalker left, that being Kylo Ren or Ben Solo? Well, what I think they could do, or almost have to do at this point, is right away at the start of this movie show that, simply put, Rey is failing and Kylo is succeeding. That alone, Rey has not been able to fully grasp what it means to be a Jedi, and doesn't know how to be a leader of the Resistance or New Rebellion, whatever it's going to be called, which is no doubt what many are counting on her to be. She also doesn't really know or understand what she's even fighting for. After all, her main goal at the start of this trilogy was to simply find a place to belong, or a family, and her goal in Episode 8 was simply to save Ben Solo. And being a Jedi is pretty much the opposite of those things. It's about giving up those you care about, or the things you want, to selflessly serve a greater good. And this is ultimately the lesson she needs to learn in this movie, that she has to learn to let go of everything she cares about or wants if she is going to be the one to save everyone, which was the lesson Yoda tried to teach Anakin once upon a time. Meanwhile, you have Kylo Ren, who sees his First Order being pushed back or perhaps defeated by the New Rebellion, and as this is happening, he is becoming more and more desperate, not to mention angrier and thus far more powerful with the dark side. The light that was pulling on him in Episode 7 is completely gone now, and honestly, I do think that's entirely what Episode 8 was about for his character. It was about him finally fully embracing the dark side. because when he was at long last free of Snoke, when he got the chance to choose his own destiny and make his own path, and Rey offered him one with her, he wanted to go off and make his own thing, which is the ultimate selfish decision, the opposite of what a Jedi would do. It was little different than Anakin telling Padme that he could make things the way we wanted them to be in Revenge of the Sith. In many ways, those two scenes are mirror images of each other, and both were meant to show how Ben and Anakin had fallen to the dark side. So with this then being established early, that Rey is failing and Kylo is growing in power, what you do is have the unsure Rey go back to Ahch-To, back to the first Jedi Temple, where she will encounter the Force Ghost of Luke, who can bestow her with the wisdom he should have in Episode 8. And while she's away, while she's learning the ways of the Jedi, this is when a desperate yet powerful Kylo Ren does something unthinkable and enacts some type of last-ditch plan that perhaps endangers the whole galaxy. And of course, somehow, someway, only Rey will be able to stop him. But the problem is, in the eyes of the New Rebellion, she has run off to who knows where. At some point then you have a brief encounter between Kylo and Leia, and though she can't reach him with her words, it still leaves Kylo a bit shaken, and this is the moment that, in his temporary weakness, the Force Ghost of Anakin Skywalker comes to him and tells him the true story of Darth Vader, which Kylo will of course reject, and it'll only seem to spur him on to carry out this crazy, galaxy-threatening plan of his. Then in the end, Rey confronts Kylo, and she is defeated by him because he has become too powerful, too strong with the dark side. But for whatever reason, he can't bring himself to kill her still. This then gives the Force Ghost of Luke Skywalker a chance to appear to Kylo and convince him to give up this crazy plan, though at this point, Kylo will have to sacrifice himself to stop it. In the end then, Rey gets to see the entire Skywalker family together as Force Ghosts, and then goes on to finally rebuild the Jedi Order. And I know what you might be thinking at this point. First, that this is very similar to a theory video I did about how this trilogy should end, which you're right about. But in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I think something like this is about the best bet. And second, you might think this isn't very much of a satisfying end. And to that I would say yes and no. Because I truly feel there needs to be a bittersweet element to the ending of this story, that Kylo must pay some sort of price for choosing the wrong path. And again, he does willingly choose the wrong path at the end of Episode 8. And even though an argument could be made that up until that point he'd just been a pawn of Snoke, that still doesn't mean he shouldn't be held accountable for his actions to at least some extent. I also know some of you will say that Reylo is endgame, and to that I'll say that, yes, there will be a love story in Episode 9, but it'll be between Finn and Rose, not Kylo and Rey, and I really don't see them focusing on two love stories in this last movie. And when you really think about it, Episode 8 was their moment. It was Rey and Ben's chance to come together and maybe go so far as to balance the Force together somehow, but Kylo rejected it. And this was probably the moment the light side also decided to reject Kylo finally and fully, which is part of the reason he will no longer feel the pull to the light. And though this final movie may still be about Rey wanting to save Kylo, or Ben Solo, we again have to go back to the lesson Rey needs to learn to become a Jedi, that letting go of the things you love or care about in service of the greater good is what it means to be a Jedi. And this is a lesson that both Anakin and Luke failed to learn, and I know some of you might take objection to that and say that Luke's strength came from his love for his family and his friends, but like it or not, look where that love got him, alone on an island, giving up on everything entirely. Now, do I personally agree that's how his story should have played out? No, and I've done plenty of videos expressing why I feel that way, but that's how the story did play out according to those actually telling the story. Now, you can completely disagree with those people and even hate them for it, but it is how the story of Star Wars is playing out right now. And again, like it or not, a strong case could be made that if Luke wasn't emotionally attached to his nephew, things may have transpired completely differently. Perhaps Luke never agrees to train him in the first place, or maybe he even strikes Ben down that night in the tent, thus preventing everything that happens next. And, well, before I go further on that topic, and it could make for a fun topic for a future video, let me just say that's all I've got for you this time. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to all of you to have your say on what you think will make for a satisfying end to the Skywalker Saga. Because again, this is my discussion starter video, which means I'll be doing a follow-up video this weekend where I delve into your comments about this topic. So by all means, tell me what you think will make for a satisfying end to the Skywalker Saga in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.